There used to be a fine line dividing the size of government in America. On one side, the necessary amount of government in order to fit what the founding fathers had envisioned. On the other and often darker side, the explosive growth of government, the stunning amount of money being spent and wasted, that cradle to the grave concept that, notes you, the American people, need as much government as possible because you aren't smart enough to make your own decisions. A new book digs deeper into how that fine line has been shattered than any previous examination. Liberties, Nemesis, the unchecked expansion of the state. Let's welcome the co-author, also a senior staff member at the Federalist, Dean Reuter. Dean, thanks so much for joining us, and I want to get right to the heart of this, and that is the nexus point of all this. Where did this all begin? Can we point to one spot, one time, where basically everything went out of control?
Well, you really can, and it's a long evolution, Ed, and thanks for having me on the program. Most people would like to think this is an invention of the modern era, but you can trace the roots of the administrative state back to Woodrow Wilson over 100 years ago. As the federal government began to get slightly larger, he put forth the proposition that the president and his agencies were not capable of running and administering the federal government. So he set up the administrative state, which was composed of learned experts who would administer the government efficiently. And they were deliberately insulated from what Wilson saw as one huge problem, and that was political wrangling. So he set them aside outside the political process on purpose. And that might not have been such a calamity 100 years ago when there were very few agencies. But things got much, much bigger during the era of President Roosevelt, and then bigger again in the era of Lyndon Johnson. Now, it's never gotten smaller, so every president is a little bit to blame, but it's been a long time coming.
You said two things in here that I wrote down: learned experts and efficiency. And when it comes to the American government and the way things are run right now, I can't see any of that working. Because isn't it fair to say that we still to this day, we have learned experts who tell us how we can efficiently do it, and every single one of them fail miserably?
Well, we certainly do have plenty of learned experts, and there's sort of proof in the pudding. If you take a look at a law library and look at the U.S. Code, which is the statutes, the laws actually passed by Congress, and you look at the regulations promulgated by the learned experts, the regulations far outstrip the number of laws. I mean, by tenfold, 100-fold. So you begin to get a sense then of where the real power in the country lies. Who's really setting the rules that we all have to play by?
If we look at one of the real problems, though, isn't it fair to say that if we're going to look at the current administration, and you are right, this is not just one administration. This goes back decades, generations, if you will. But if we look at the Obama presidency, this is a group that insulates civil servants from politics and accountability. Isn't that really what we're talking about here, Dean? The accountability is always missing.
It is, and but unfortunately that's by design. That's what makes the whole contraption, if you will, antithetical to the Constitution. If you're a student of the Constitution, you know the framers feared the concentration of power in one person or a small group of people. That's what we have now, and the way they tried to overcome that possibility was by dividing power, so that people only got a certain amount of power in each branch of the government. So the president's opportunistic, and then the agencies are opportunistic in exercising power, but you have to point a bit of a finger at the Congress as well, because they are the ones in the first instance that created every agency, and in the second instance that continue to delegate broad, sweeping powers to those agencies.
So about 90 seconds I have left then. Let's get optimistic here for a moment, which is always difficult when we're talking about the rise of government. In the book, though, what can you bring forward and what can people take from it that should at least be the starting point of trying to get that fine line back and maybe make it a little bit thicker, maybe take away some of this government, Dean?
Great question. In this election season, I think people need to pay attention to the candidates and what they're saying about big government versus limited government, small government, constrained government. And if we end up with a president who believes in a constitutional form of government, some of the genie can be put back in the bottle. The president would have to direct the agencies to exercise power extremely modestly, and the president would have to be very vigilant in picking out the right people to run those agencies and work with Congress to reduce some of those agencies. Some of them are clearly unnecessary. Many of them are overfunded. And work with Congress to stop delegating those broad powers.
Got about 20 seconds left. Isn't it fair to say this is something that I've been harping on constantly? It's still the American voter who puts these people in power, and you touched on that. Go back, listen, do your research, and stop putting these people in power and giving them the authority, Dean, yes?
Precisely so, and that's at every level, not just the level of the president, but the level of your congressman.
Learn about what we're facing right now and learn about some ways to get out of it, because it's all in here. The book, once again, is Liberties, Nemesis, the Unchecked Expansion of the State. It will give you a lot of room to think, and properly so, think in time for an election and who is going to be running this country next. Dean Reuter, a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the book. I hope we get a chance to talk again. Now, you get some other ideas to think about as well, because there's more to this than just the government, more than politics. We cover it all here. Stay with us. The Hardline continues.